Money. You can't live with it, and you can't live, well, actually, that's not true. You can't live without it, basically. That's it. That's all there is to it. Money is an interesting thing. It's been around forever. Well, that's not true, not forever, but it's been around for a long time. And it'll make people do embarrassing, desperate, cringy things. And it's taken on a lot of different forms, shells or other physical objects that are traded and used to store value. Then it transitions into more standardized precious metals that are imprinted with signifiers of monarchies or governments, to the more modern day paper note. And now, of course, we have things like credit cards, where the money is stored in a digital form. It's zeros and ones on a computer, and it's more of a representation of the asset. Now, we're seeing the rise of cryptocurrency. I'm not an expert about the technology behind cryptocurrency. I don't know a lot about the blockchain. But it doesn't ultimately matter too much when we're talking about how does it affect the environment, because mostly what we're going to be looking at is the energy demands required. So just to give us a background, what is cryptocurrency? The way it sets itself apart from other currencies is that it's distributed. If one person wants to send money to another person, usually it has to go through a bank. And with cryptocurrency, the fact that it's on this diffuse network of computers, no single entity or government is in control. And people like this for a variety of reasons, but two big ones are that one, it provides a lot of privacy, and two, there's no single point of failure in the system like there could be in a traditional banking or a centralized system. Now that's all well and good, but what is really important for this video is how the cryptocurrency is mined. And for that, let's take a moment to quickly refresh ourselves on the original asset acquisition: gold mining. Okay, we all understand gold as a precious metal that can be extracted from the earth via mining. And the term mining here is taken directly from gold mining. So when you mine for gold, you are putting in work and you're putting in energy to extract a rare material from the earth and concentrate it into larger quantities than you would find naturally. And in order to do that, you must put in work. So what gold represents is energy expenditure, right? Work. And so if we kind of keep that analogy and we look at how, for example, Bitcoin is mined, it's kind of the same idea. The only difference is that Bitcoin is not mined with physical labor, right? You're not actually, hacking away with a pickaxe. What you're doing instead is you're assembling a computer and computer components to solve computational math problems that are very complex. And so the way Bitcoin is mined is kind of like a competition or a race amongst different groups of computers fighting to see which computer setup can solve the equation the fastest. The one that solves it is awarded one block of Bitcoin, which is about 6 Bitcoins. And then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And so it's just like a constant race, right? And how do you win that race? Well, you have a fast computer. So what that usually means is it's not just a single computer. In fact, some of these setups, these Bitcoin mining operations, have thousands of computers all working in tandem to solve these problems. Now, we talk about work and we talk about energy as the underlying reason why something like gold is valuable. With Bitcoin, the proof of work here is the energy expended by the computers to solve that computational math problem. And so here we start to dive into how this impacts the environment. Okay, so let's make this very clear. Let's just lay this out. Bitcoin mining operations or crypto mining operations use energy in the form of electricity. So let's trace this back. So where does this electricity come from? It comes from power producing facilities. What are these power producing facilities? There's a variety of different ways in which we can produce electricity, and some are better for the environment than others. Most of our energy on Earth right now, and most of our electricity, is in the form of fossil fuel-based energy sources. Now, why is coal and natural gas environmentally problematic? This is sort of, environmental science, climate change 101 stuff, but just as a quick recap. The point of this video is not to go through all of the consequences of climate change. You can look that up, that's fine. The point of this video is just to draw that clear connection of the energy used by the mining operations and tracing that energy back to its source, which in this case is going to be mostly from coal power or natural gas, and that connection to climate change.
Objection, speculation.
Now, one objection might be something like, well, maybe they're not using that much energy. Or, hey, maybe the energy that they're using is actually coming from renewable sources. Maybe they're not using coal power. Well, luckily for us, there is a benchmarking study that was carried out. This is a 70-page document that has a lot of different information about cryptocurrency. But part of the assessment looked at the energy sources used by these operations. If we dive into that particular part of the benchmarking study, we can look at some of the numbers that they have. And I think it's kind of enlightening and insightful about the kind of energy that these mining operations are using and just how much they're using. But before we dive into that data, just two quick notes about this benchmarking study. The first is the data that they were collecting here was collected via survey. So what the researchers did was they distributed these surveys globally to, I believe it was 280 different entities across 59 countries. And on top of the surveys, they did manual sort of like desktop research as well to supplement and augment it, such as things like web scraping using Python scripts. They collected data from company websites and research reports and media outlets. They even called and followed up with some of these companies and these organizations. But it's important to note that it is survey data. So these are people responding to a survey that they received. So bear that in mind, as it is an important part of the methodology here. The second quick caveat is that in the report, they use the term hasher. What hasher basically means is a cryptocurrency mining operation. So a hasher is a individual or a group or an organization that is mining for cryptocurrency. Where is the energy coming from? Where is the electricity coming from to power these mining operations? Is it really coming from fossil fuel sources? It might be true that these Bitcoin miners are like all, tapping into wind and solar and not using coal. Well, that's actually just not true. So if you look at the numbers, what we see here is that of the percentage of energy used by hashers, 39% is coming from renewable, meaning things like wind and solar, but mostly it turns out hydropower. So if you don't know what hydropower is when you build a dam on a running source of water, usually a large river, and you use the kinetic energy of the moving water to spin a turbine, which generates electricity that you can use to power Bitcoin mining operations, for example, or anything else that uses electricity. And the reason why we have such a high amount of hydropower is because a lot of the Bitcoin mining is happening in China. And China happens to have the world's largest hydropower dam. And this dam is on the Yangtze River, and it goes by the name of the Three Gorges Dam. So they get a lot of power from hydro. But keep in mind that this is only 29 to 39% of all of the energy used by these hashers is coming from renewable sources. The larger percent, the majority, 61%, is coming from fossil fuel-based sources like coal and natural gas, which is really no different than the global percentage of electricity that comes from non-renewables. Anyway, the electricity that Bitcoin miners are using, it's pretty much in lockstep with the global averages, so there's nothing special about where they're getting their electricity from. Now, to be fair, there are some interesting cases out there that you can find about Bitcoin miners using some interesting sources of energy for their operations, such as nuclear, by teaming up with a nuclear fission company, or coal waste, sometimes called GOB, or, for example, there is something called flare gas, which is basically when a oil well is tapping into an oil reserve. There's oftentimes natural gas in the reserve that is vented out of the well and is burned and combusted, and that energy is not really used. And there's been some interesting cases of people capturing some of that gas that would be wasted otherwise and using it to mine Bitcoin. That's great. That's amazing. That's an awesome way to offset the carbon and do something useful with it. And I am 100% on board with that. But it's important to note that those are the rare exceptions and are not by any means the common way that people are using energy for Bitcoin mining. And the benchmarking study that we've been looking at here has one line in their report about this flare gas, and it's just simply to say that their data doesn't allow them to infer like what share or percentage of natural gas usage corresponds with this stranded gas or flare gas. Now, the next claim might be like, well, okay, so even if they are using fossil fuel-based sources, are they really using that much energy? Does it really take that much power to mine for Bitcoin? And the answer there, absolutely. And this is what might be the most shocking of all the statistics, is just the sheer amount of energy that is being harnessed and used by these hashers, these Bitcoin miners. According to the University of Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index, it is estimated that the network power demand for Bitcoin is 128.98 terawatt hours of energy. And they give a theoretical lower and upper bound. And in their own words, these upper and lower bounds are just simply like theoretical maximums and minimums to help delineate the theoretically possible max and min. But what we really care about here is this estimated average in the middle. These estimates are updated every 24 hours. And at the time of making this in March of 2022, these are their upper, lower, and estimated annualized energy. So this is how much energy is used in 1 year. So let's just put this in perspective. The big five tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, use an estimated 45 terawatt hours per year. That means Bitcoin uses almost triple the amount of energy that the 5 largest tech companies in the world use combined. Okay. Those are just companies. What about states? California, the world's 5th largest economy, home to almost 40 million people, used a total of 272 terawatt hours of electricity in the year 2020. That means Bitcoin miners used almost half the amount of electricity that the entire state of California did in 1 year. Okay. That's just a state. What about countries? Here are some countries that consumed less electricity in an entire year than Bitcoin miners did. Argentina, Norway, Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, Netherlands. In other words, if Bitcoin miners were a country, they'd place about 28th on the list of most electricity consuming countries in the world. That is insane. So yes, Bitcoin mining requires a lot of electricity. there's one other kind of piece that we should probably think about, and that is, yeah, it uses a lot of energy, but how does that compare to the amount of energy and electricity that our current financial system uses, or gold mining, for example? Is it comparable? This is a very difficult question to answer, and in my research, I found one study that attempted to quantify the energy needs of our banking system and of gold mining to compare them to Bitcoin. This study was done by a company called Galaxy Digital, who is in the cryptocurrency space. So keep that in mind, that there's, some bias potentially there. But from looking over the study, it seems fair analysis. So there are several reasons why this comparison between Bitcoin and our banking system or gold mining is not perfect, because of just the difference in the infrastructure, and also there's just so many variables and so many layers and so many things involved that it's almost impossible to perfectly estimate. But just to give us some numbers here so we can kind of get a general idea, they estimate that the banking system uses about 264 terawatt hours of electricity per year, and gold mining uses about 241 terawatt hours per year. So they use about double the amount of electricity that Bitcoin mining does. Okay, so what? Yeah, cryptocurrency in its current state uses massive amounts of energy, and most of that energy is from fossil fuels. But what about it? Most things we do as humans use massive amounts of fossil fuel-based energy and contribute to the environmental harms like climate change. But we still do them because, either implicitly or explicitly, we just think they're important enough. The benefits of these activities outweigh the harms. So, the question is, I don't know. Neither do you. No one really knows. That's because the answer to that question is subjective. It's based on speculation and a person's philosophical perspective on the utility of Bitcoin. In the Galaxy Digital study I referenced earlier, even they acknowledge that the underlying issue here is a philosophical one. If, on one hand, you think Bitcoin is useless, then no amount of energy is going to be worth it. If, on the other hand, you think Bitcoin is the future of our currency and that it will replace gold or our banking systems, then you might argue that the energy expenditure is an important feature of its security, and that market forces will sort of establish an appropriate level of energy expenditure. So I'm not here to condemn or condone necessarily the electricity use of something like Bitcoin. And I know that might sound like fence-sitting, but I'm not an expert. I don't have the technical background, or I haven't spent my whole life learning about cryptocurrency or blockchain technology to have a strong conviction on its future implications. So, to be intellectually honest, I have to say I don't know. Because for all I know, in 50 years, we all might be using Bitcoin or some other blockchain-based digital currency. But I do consider myself fairly informed on the evidence for climate change. And it seems pretty clear that we're looking down the long barrel of a future climate crisis. And our energy consumption as a society has its carbon-based finger on the trigger. And if cryptocurrency is just some futuristic, sexy, tech-inspired version of the long and historied pump and dump scheme that capitalizes on people's fear of missing out, then there's no amount of Bitcoin that can buy our way out of the future it may be helping mine us into. So I'll leave it up to the experts and the people who think deeply and spend their lives thinking about these kinds of technologies to answer the question of, is it worth it? I'll put my trust in them. But as a society, I think it would serve us all if we were a little bit more reflective and a little bit more diligent in considering the impacts of the things we do. Whether it's our fossil fuel-based transportation or our energy-intensive meat industry, or Bitcoin. Thanks for watching.